What's up, NBA fans? What's up, all sports fans? This your boy JB, host of the Behind the Bench Podcast Network and channel, giving a shout out to the rest of the crew: Shad, Kelvin, Jermaine, KB, Film Room, Big Dog, Talk Sports. That's right, that's right. Everyone who's tuning in, thank you for supporting Behind the Bench. Subscribe to the channel, help make the show the best that it can be. Well, I don't mean to burst the bubble, but let's talk about the bubble, the NBA bubble, people. This was an experiment. I would say an experiment that went haywire. And, you know, like I always say, for people who really take the time to listen to our videos here at BTB, we really appreciate your input. We appreciate your support. And, I think I've expressed my passion for the NBA, being a fan of the league, for a very, very long time. I don't profess to be the greatest fan ever. I don't profess to be the most knowledgeable fan ever. But what I try to do is uphold the history of the game. So when you have an individual out here who makes a statement and say that the bubble chip was the hardest championship to win, or this was the purest form of basketball, I'm supposed to sit here and not only slight or throw all of the championships my squad won, the Los Angeles Lakers, prior to the bubble. I'm supposed to, just kick to the curb all of the championships I've seen other great teams win in the past, and then learn about the teams that won the championships uh, prior to me starting to watch the NBA. And basically, when you get right down to it, since the league's inception back in 1946. And also, I'm supposed to brown bag future champions who have won titles outside of the bubble experiment, because that's exactly what that was. And uh, this guy, man, the Hurricane, and I know his fans feel a certain way. And I know fans of the story Purple and Gold, who was led to embrace this dude, I know they feel a certain way. But if you peel back the layers of this bubble, it's going to clearly show and reveal all of the negative traits and attributes and circumstances that followed the bubble, that is really taken about 3 years to recover from. What I mean by that is, well, let's just go back. Let's just go back. Okay, we all know what happened. The world was under the threat of a pandemic that was identified as COVID-19. And when the COVID started to threaten America or the United States, at that time the NBA was about 3/4 into a season. And I believe the first person who was reported to have been exposed to the COVID, not contracted COVID, but been exposed to the COVID, was one Rudy Gobert. And I believe it was on a Wednesday night, matter of fact. And then immediately the commissioner did the appropriate thing. He shut down the league. And I believe in my heart of hearts, he was in the process of just canceling the rest of the season, which to me, considering the threat of this virus, that had been the appropriate thing to do, because at that point, sports became secondary, as much as we love sports. And my thinking was always, okay, this is something that's uncommon, it's rare, yes, we will miss basketball, we will miss sports, but there's enough uh, uh, things that we can do to tie us over until this COVID begins to regress, or at least when they start coming up with treatments and the like to help people either recover from it or not acquire it at all, or be exposed to it all, or be affected by it at all, I should say. So it was a lot of stuff going on, right? And then which led up to the summer with all of the social unrest that was taking place because of issues with police being belligerent towards citizens and patrons and whatnot. And I'm not going to get off into all the incidents that occurred. But at that point, the appropriate thing was, let's shut the season down. There was enough games that was played. It was 71 games where we could have, awarded a league MVP. We could have awarded a coach of the year, sixth man of the year, defense player of the year, most improved player of the year, whatnot. And it'd been all good. And I believe there was even conversations of, crowning a regular season champion for the team with the best record, which is, it's not the same as actually watching a team win a championship through the playoffs, but considering the circumstances, that would have been a logical thing to do. Now remember, the NBA shut its season down. The NHL did the same thing, National Hockey League, and the NCAA. Now remember, the NBA was shut down in March, around like the middle of March. Well, the NCAA tournament was on, scheduled to begin, and the NCAA shut down the men's tournament and the women's tournament because they wanted to protect their collegiate athletes. I said, wow, that's the right thing to do, because you didn't know how serious this thing was, and then we started learning, people, started to succumb to the COVID, and people was dying and stuff. So, and I'm not trying to be morbid or anything. I'm just trying to set the table for how this all began to transpire. And then all of a sudden, now baseball season hadn't started yet. Football season had just ended. So it didn't impact the NFL. And then baseball came up with a plan, a strategy where their season they would start playing Major League Baseball games around the month of July, and then kind of like prorate the season from there. And that way, their season would still be on the regular timeline, right? To where the postseason would start according to the natural schedule, and then the World Series and whatnot. So they was able to address that. And all of a sudden, they start coming up with this idea of the bubble. Now, this is key right here. Now, before they announced this bubble, the commissioner sent a memo to all 30 teams in the league saying you're not allowed to use your practice facility. Your players are not allowed to use their practice facility or team facility because of the COVID threat, because the league was trying to protect the players. So it was a lot of smart choices that was made initially. And all of a sudden, news broke out that he was going to put this bubble together. I'm saying, a bubble? I was like, what's a bubble? Why? You know what I'm saying? And this is the key. I'm really going to, because this has never been said on any of these sports programs. None of these talking heads have mentioned this. Now, number one, the only team that's reported to be using their facility to practice was none other than the Purple and Gold. Because, as far as rules and regulations and protocols, they don't apply to the Hurricane. It don't apply. That's a whole nother story. And initially, he was against the idea of playing in the bubble. He was against it. Now, this is key. Technically, there should not have been a champion determined for the 1920 season. Here's why. Normally, when the NBA season concludes, whenever a team wins the finals and becomes champion, normally the season ends around late June, right? And then they start getting ready for the upcoming season around the middle of September. So technically, they have about 3 months, or a little short of 3 months, to recover in between seasons, right? Let their body recover, let it heal or whatnot, things that, basketball players do. Now, remember, basketball players are accustomed to playing from October to April at least. That's if you're not a playoff team. If you are a playoff team, you may play the month of April. And if you happen to advance to the finals, you play into the month of June. Now, check this out. This is key. The bubble, number one, started around the last week of June, after the league was shut down around the middle of March. So technically, that time period between when the league was shut down to when the bubble started was longer than the actual NBA offseason. So I asked myself, how can the winner of this bubble be crowned champion for the 1920 season when the off season was closer to 4 months? The time between shutting down the league up until the bubble was closer to 4 months off than 3. See, so in theory, if anything, and this is how all this began to get crossed up, the winner of the bubble, that should have been an entity within itself, meaning it should not have applied to the 20 season or the 21 season. It should have been its own entity. Number 2, it was introduced and billed in structure as a tournament. You want proof? When the bubble started, they didn't just proceed to have an immediate playoff. They had a seeding round to where all of the teams that participated in the bubble or was in position to qualify for a playoff spot, they had to compete in that seeding round before the playoffs started. And I did some research a couple of weeks ago. The bubble eventually spawned the play-in tournament that started the next year for the 2020-21 NBA campaign. There's been a lot of conflict, a lot of, back and forth about whether this play-in tournament is benefiting the league, because in theory, 82 games should be enough of opportunity to prove that you're good enough to qualify for the playoffs. 82 games. Now, as the play-in has become commonplace, well, quite naturally, because they're going to continue it for at least for the time being. Okay, that's what it is. But that doesn't mean that it should be. You see where I'm getting at? So, like I said, the bubble was introduced as a tournament. It was structured almost like like in college basketball, where they have the conference championships. And if you win the conference championship, you automatically qualify for the NCAA tournament. And then from that point, you have to be selected by, the NCAA committee if you're not a conference champion or automatic top seed to be invited to the tournament as an at-large bid. That's the equivalent of how that bubble was structured. Okay. Number 3 or number 4. A lot of the teams, man, that eventually participated, that were invited to the bubble, because not all 30 teams were invited. You can tell a lot of the players, man, who begrudgingly agreed to participate in that thing. You could tell they weren't really motivated and they didn't give their full effort. You can tell. You can tell. So what I'm trying to say is, how can I put this, man? How can I put this? It was something that was forced, in essence, because the league had an interest in it. Maybe I ain't gonna say maybe, but part of it was the league had an interest, and then certain players had an interest. Primarily, you know who. Okay, number 4, number 5. The president of the Players Union. She made a formal announcement saying that during the time that this bubble was going to take place, if one person, not one person contracting the COVID or being exposed to the COVID, I keep on saying the word attracting, being exposed to the COVID, but if it was reported that a person was exposed to the COVID, the bubble would be shut down permanently. Now think about this. Think about this. Now, knowing how serious of a threat the COVID became, when we started learning of people being seriously affected by this thing, right? Well, there's other facets of society that try to take all measures possible to keep people from, being exposed to it. Essentially, society was shut down to where you whatever your normal activity was, you couldn't do those things. Out of pure health safety. And all the precaution that was taken outside of sports, people were still being affected and still being exposed to the COVID. What I'm saying is, think about it. They said if it was reported or confirmed that a person was exposed to it, the bubble would be shut down. So think about this. You had all these players down there, right? Now remember, there are a lot of players, especially in the beginning, who had to leave the bubble, but they didn't explain why. Because if it was confirmed that the reason why they left the bubble was because they was exposed to the COVID, the bubble would have ended right then and there. You see where I'm getting at? Okay. So the bubble started in late June. It ended in late October, around, like about a week before Halloween. Now, and then the off season took place, where all of your normal off season activity, the draft, free agency, and trade scenarios, trade acquisitions, all that was compressed and condensed into 2 weeks' time. Into 2 weeks' time. Do you know how fast that is? 2 weeks. Now, normally, the draft takes place about a week after the finals end. Free agency starts on July 1st. And then, from that point on, there's a moratorium on when free agency can start, where you can start signing free agents. And then, that free agency period can last all the way during it up until the start of training camp. And then at that same time period, you can, complete a trade deal or whatnot. Then they came up with a 72 game schedule, right? A 72 game schedule after 2 weeks of an off season. And in preparation for that new season, teams had about less than a week of training camp, right? And some teams, their training camp really only lasted 3 days. And then you had an average of 2 to 3 preseason games, right? And then your season started. Now remember about that first month in, the players, man, they looked out of shape. You could tell they was not in condition, and the play overall was lethargic. It seemed like everybody was about a step slow. So what do you think would happen when everything is compressed and rushed and you try to start a season under enormous duress? What do you think is going to happen? Exactly what we saw transpire during that season. We saw a rash of injuries like we've never seen before. To role players, starters, reserves, all-stars, superstars. Now remember, 2 players in the bubble, the first week of the bubble, one guy injured his ACL and took him during the 3 seasons to recover from, Jonathan Isaac of the Orlando Magic. And I believe Ben Simmons injured his knee too in that first round playoff series. I think they played Boston in the first round, Philadelphia, and he missed the rest of that whole run in the bubble because NBA players are not used to competing during the summer months. So what I'm saying, the timeline of the NBA became so disjointed that it literally took about 3 seasons to get everything back on point in terms of the timeline. And it was all because of them scheduling that bubble. So the concern should have been even more so, well, just as much as the COVID. Now you start talking about potential career-ending injuries or injuries that leave you, have you shut down for a long period of time. Jamal Murray suffered an ACL during that season, and it took him 2 years to recover from. And then if you notice, Denver won the title in 2023, 2 years after he injured the ACL during that compressed 72-game season. Now remember, when he injured the ACL, that was like about 10 games after they acquired Aaron Gordon via trade from the Orlando Magic. And meaning if Murray had not got hurt, Denver probably would have went to the finals in 2021 for the first time. Under the Nikola Jokic era rather than 2023. See, and then of course, Kawhi Leonard, he wound up injuring his ACL, then he missed the whole next season. Zion Williamson, he was dealing with a little knick-knack injury during that year. And then the following season, he missed the whole 82-game schedule. Now, I know players have suffered injuries in the past, but we saw a rash of them during that time period because of how the bubble threw the whole timeline off whack. Anthony Davis, he got injured in the bubble during the bubble final versus Miami, where he was grabbing the back of his foot, and they was like, all like he holding his calf. No, he was grabbing his Achilles. His Achilles almost popped. And remember, going into that next season, he was never really in shape because he never had time to really recover from that injury. And as a result, he suffered a multiple injury during the next year where he wound up missing half the season because he wasn't in real shape. But then the talking head said, well, he wasn't prepared and blase, blase, blase. No, the man was injured when the season started. Me personally, I believe it's because of the timeline that was compromised because of that bubble. See, when you like I said, man, I'm not trying to be negative about it. I'm just trying to be real about it. If the bubble had not happened, the following season would have started on time, right? Like I said, you can still acknowledge all the awards for the season that had to be shut down due to COVID. because it was enough games that was played. So you don't want to slight nobody. But at the same time, man, you have to protect the players because there's only 450 players in the NBA. You see what I'm saying? So you have to ultimately do what's best long term, right? And then, like I said, it took about 3 years before we back on point, we back on schedule now. So what I'm trying to say is, man, sometimes it's better to do the right thing where you may take an initial setback up front, but if you act sensibly, you won't have lingering problems down the road. Whereas when you create something out of self-interest, or if something's being done out of self-interest, yeah, it may benefit certain individuals, but it's going to harm a whole lot of other people in the process. So what I'm saying is, people, and then and as far as, like I said, the degree of difficulty, that's slighting every champion that had to go out there in a playoff battle, round for round, to clinch that championship. Where you had to play home games, you had to play road games in hostile territory. You know what I'm saying? Because to me, when I look back at the history of it all, I think the team from the first round to the championship that went on to win the championship, that had the highest degree of difficulty throughout that I've seen was the 1995 Houston Rockets. They was the 6th seed, so they was the road team in every series that they had to play in and eventually advance. First round, the 60-win Utah Jazz. And that Utah Jazz was a B squad. Karl Malone's on top of his game. John Stockton. I think they had Blue Edwards was still on that team, if I'm not mistaken. They had a hell of a team. They won 60 games. Second round in the conference semifinals, the 59-win Phoenix Suns with prime Charles Barkley. You had KJ. You had Dan Morley and the like. Richard Dumas, right? They had to overcome a 3-1 deficit as the road team to come back and win that series. And then they faced MVP David Robinson and the 62-win San Antonio Spurs, who was favored to win the title going to the postseason because they had a top-ranked defense. And Hakeem Olajuwon, he played on a level that you rarely see in your life. And then the 59-win Orlando Magic with the best starter, featuring the best starting 5 in the league with Shaq Penny, Nick Anderson, Dennis Scott, and Horace Grant. And the Houston Rockets had to beat all 4 of them teams as the road squad to clinch that championship. I think they had the hardest road to a title ever. When you consider the degree of difficulty and as far as the win total of those teams, they was playing teams that average was winning 60 games per round. So what I'm trying to say is, you don't never hear players out there, man. You don't hear Michael Jordan saying we won the hardest title ever. You don't hear Kobe Bryant saying that. You don't hear. Now they may that in the back of their mind, they may think they had the greatest team ever. You okay. A player gonna feel that way about their squad. That's no biggie, man. But I'm talking about where you say this is the purest form of basketball. This was the hardest title anybody ever had to win. No, man. I'm telling you, dog, he goes against the grain of everything. You think Bill Russell had a cakewalk during the 60s? If you go back and look at them finals and them playoff battles versus Will Chamberlain, most of those matchups, man, they went 7 games and they came down to the last bucket, the last possession. So on average, they was winning. They were clinching series in the 7th game by 2 points. So what I'm saying is, that's why when you crown a champion, they always say the 1979-1980 champion of the Los Angeles Lakers, the 1986 champions of the Boston Celtics, or the 2014 champions of the San Antonio Spurs, the 2023 champions of the Denver Nuggets. You see what I'm saying? And a newly crowned champion we're gonna see that this year. So what I'm trying to say, people, is to me, that bubble was more trouble than it's worth. Because what's sad about it is most basketball fans don't even recognize that thing. And if let's say if the Clippers would have won the bubble as their first ever championship, it's safe to say that they'd have been teased and mocked for it. Like, this y'all first championship in the bubble? And you can tell the Milwaukee Bucks didn't really want to try to win that thing. You can tell. Because they came back the very next year determined, and they came back the next year and won it. And remember, they lost to Miami in the bubble, and I believe that was the second round. And they came back the next year, man, and swept them in brutal fashion. I mean, that sweep was brutal what they did in Miami that year. And I think Milwaukee could have repeated, but they was really never the same after Chris Middleton got hurt when he suffered that knee injury. Once he injured that knee, Milwaukee they've been a good team, and then other teams just got better too along the way. That's just how it is, But yeah, man, I just want to throw that out here, man. I think the bubble was an experiment, man, that hurt the NBA in a lot of ways. Because towards the end of it, ratings were very, very low. You couldn't get people to tune in. And what's ironic about it is people were restricted from going anywhere really in the outside world. They had to be confined at home because of the COVID threat. So you would think there's more people available to tune in and watch. But what's funny is the Bulls documentary that aired that same year. This was a month after the COVID really became, of daily existence. That was the highest rated documentary series in the history of ESPN about a team from 25 years ago. So what I'm trying to say is, people, there's something fundamentally wrong with the bubble. That's what I'm trying to say. Because it didn't have to be. It didn't have to be. That's what I'm trying to say. So, like I said, man, I'm not trying to, cast aspersions. I'm just trying to bring a real balanced perspective to it. And why, to me, I think the league in the history would have been better served if we didn't have it at all. Like I said, there's a lot of fans out there cynical about it or whatnot. And then as far as me as a fan of the Lakers, the fact that we mortgaged everything away for that, and they haven't done nothing since and not going to do anything as currently constituted, as long as that dude's on the squad, man, that's heavy, man. That's heavy. It's real, though. It's real, man. And like I said, man, you see all these other teams want to come up, and it happened fast. Remember the next year, Phoenix Suns beat the Lakers in the first round. They went to the finals. They first finals since 1993, and went up 2-0 in that finals before Giannis went pure Superman mode. Because otherwise, Phoenix would have won the title. And then Golden State, they retooled with their youth that they brought in and won a title. And then Denver was prime. They built up 7 years around Jokic, then Murray, and then Michael Porter, whatnot. And now you got the OKCs of the world. Now the Timberwolves going to 2 straight conference finals. Now you got the Houston Rockets number 2 seed. Cleveland won 60-something games. Boston won a title staying with their core players. Orlando Magic, Detroit Pistons. So what I'm saying is, man, when the tide turns, it turns quick. And remember, that title represented, that bubble represented the last basketball season of the previous decade. So what I'm saying, for the purple and gold, that was it right there. There's nothing else coming down the pipe. So please leave your comments and thoughts. I'd like to read your opinions about this. But I just want to drop that nugget until next time. JB BTB behind the